Hello, everybody. Welcome to another RPC podcast. And it's very interesting that we have this week a special guest visitor who has, I believe, somewhat recently started listening to the podcast and has, made some posts around Reddit that we thought, it would be really cool if we could just bring somebody in who doesn't have a whole lot of experience or history with RPC and our mentality and say, let's just have a conversation and talk about some life issues. And we can use some things that you posted as content for that, or we can just talk generally. But why don't we let you start off yourself, Mr. Ocean Gross, with a little bit of background on you and what brings you to these parts of the woods.
Well, thank you, John. I actually really appreciate that. I guess my red pill journey started back in 2016 with the famous meme war. Although I got red pilled on some things and not on others, and then recently, getting married and starting to learn about, oh my goodness, there's so much more that I didn't know. And I come from the background, evangelical background of egalitarian or maybe complementarian of some sort, and just realizing that it doesn't exactly work out the way that you want it to. And it's not to say that I wouldn't want it to. It'd be great if we were, all able to get along like people, but there's so much more to marriage than what I had initially thought about.
Unpack that for us a little bit. What do you mean by you would want it to, but it seems like we can't? Tell me what you mean by that.
I think it's the same thing why, I just wish that people didn't commit crime. If we didn't have murder, I think it'd be a better place to live in. And of course, that's obviously wishful thinking. It's not going to happen. But with marriage, it would be so much easier if they had a different mentality going into it than they actually. We talked briefly about what they say they want and then what they actually want, what their desires are, and how those are two different things.
And I'm just going to ask here too. So you mentioned you've recently gotten married. How recently, and you can maybe help us understand some of the background there. Did you date beforehand? How long have you known this gal?
It's a funny story though. She was my waitress at Cracker Barrel, and we were totally not expecting it. And we had dated for maybe around 4-ish months. We got engaged pretty soon, and we felt really comfortable with this because her parents got married in 2 weeks after knowing each other. They had met, and then 2 weeks later they got married and are still married to this day. For us, we were like, well, we're taking it slow sort of thing, relatively speaking, of course. And we've been married for about 3 months now.
Okay. So this is Levi, the Christian Alpha, talking. I don't know if you're differentiating between voices, but what was so you guys dated for 4 months, you guys have been married for 3 months, so pretty quick. What was your guys' walk with God like before you guys got married? What was your guys' how were the interactions between you and her while you were dating? Would you say they were like pretty respectful, like her respecting you? Stuff like that. How did that go?
So I should preface this by saying I used to be, the beta male orbiter, because that's what we were taught when growing up in society today. We were almost taught to be, this is how you should treat women, and it's certainly not biblical by any means. So I in my previous relationships, I was definitely a simp, and I was not in the right frame of mind. And it's a double play on words there, because obviously, I would recently watch your podcast on frame. I love learning about that. By the way, I still have to figure that out.
It's one of the big concepts. It takes a minute. Don't worry if it doesn't hit you all at once.
Yeah. And one of the things that helped me was really growing up and starting to find my own way in life and figure out what I wanted. Ever since I was little, I always knew that I really wanted a family. That was my goal. Like, some people are like, oh, I want to, be an astronaut or whatever. Mine was like, I want a family with kids. That's what I wanted. And I also knew that doing that would be really, really difficult, and I would have to work on myself. And I worked, if you guys, any of you follow John Lavelle at all, the Warrior Poet Society sort of deal. I worked on the poet side of me without working on the warrior side of me. And then I enlisted in the army and stuff like that. And then I started to work on the warrior side of me. But
were you guys both solid Christians going into this, or would you say you guys were solid Christians?
Yes.
Okay.
Going into it, I would absolutely say that. And, there's obviously always highs and lows going into it. I wasn't exactly too comfortable with the churchianity, as you guys call it, consumer Christianity. It goes by multiple different names, lukewarm. I was not comfortable with it because it seems like those people were not dedicated their life. They didn't dedicate their life to Christ. It was just, I go to church on Sunday and this is sort of a happy-go-lucky, fun thing for me. But the Bible's, I'm not going to really listen to it because it doesn't make me feel good.
Getting into a little bit about, what prompted this conversation. You had made a post, not on RPC. I don't remember which forum it was off the top of my head, but you made a post about your wife getting a tattoo and you weren't exactly thrilled about that. Talk us through a little bit about that situation. The post was pretty brief, so details are scarce. What was going on?
Of course, details are scarce, and things are, definitely having to be apart from my job and everything like that is not fun. Probably in about 2 or 3 months, I'm finally going to be able to live in the same area as she is and not have to worry about, living in a different area. But she's spending time with her family right now, and her family comes from a background, they all have tattoos, and they're really decent people. And for me, I came from a background of like no one in our family has it. And it's not to say that they're, unrighteous per se, but there is definitely a correlation. The saying, men want debt-free tattoo-less versions, right? So there's a reason that men sort of want that. And so for me, that was such a shock. And I had reacted very, very, that was 100% completely my fault. I reacted so poorly to that. And I talked to John a little bit about that, so I won't get into too much of it. But it's not like it was really a big deal. It was the big thing was the way I reacted to it. And I realized that was a step back moment for me. Like, I need to fix myself because that was so wrong. But not in the sense for her, but in the sense for me as a man. Like, that is not how a man should be acting at all. So I had to take a step back and reevaluate.
Unpack that a little bit. What was your reaction that was not how a man should act?
I was currently with the Army away, not in town. And I got pretty mad because it was over text and I did not have the ability to call, and I got drunk. And so, and I definitely said things that I was definitely should not have said that. Thankfully, I know it could have been worse, and it wasn't as bad as it was. And I actually had never gotten drunk before. That was the first time. And I usually don't have alcohol in the house. It was the only time I actually had alcohol nearby, because you're with the Army. You have a lot of guys who are like that there. That was a wake up call for me, realizing that was such a poor reaction. And that was living in her frame instead of existing in my own. And yeah.
Let's see, this was about a month ago. Is that right? I'm looking at the post on, looks like it says a month ago. I don't know if that's about right, but back up a little bit to, if you could rewind and you could do it over again, what would your approach be now?
Wait, because talking about a tattoo over text is not really something that you should ever do. If it's a big deal, what I would do is I would have just said, seriously, wait. And I didn't say wait. It was sort of on a fling thing. And there was extenuating circumstances surrounding that, but that created a sense of urgency that should not have been there, but it actually was there.
You would have told her to wait, or that you yourself would have been patient in responding until you had an appropriate context?
Both. I would have told her, wait until I'm there, and then we can work this out. Because I'm not completely opposed to it. I just think that the way that she went about it was inappropriate. Of getting it on her own when I was away was not a good idea.
Reading the post here, it says, I told her it would make me quite uncomfortable to make a quick choice like that about something so permanent, and I would feel much better if we talked about it first. And then you came home she came home with a tattoo, and it was a Bible verse and a flower, so it's not anything overtly like horrific or anything to that end. Do you feel like you were giving a decisive answer at that point? Or I read this and I see this as more of kind of a, I feel like this wouldn't be good, kind of wishy-washy sort of answer.
See, I was very reserved with what I put out online. But no, I was not. I was like, I really think you should wait. And the mistake that I made was, instead of actually being affirmative and sure of myself, like John and I were talking about earlier, I used to say, I think, maybe, I wonder, I feel, sort of not affirming things to say, not I'm very confident in my choice. And if I was confident in my choice, says you're going to have to wait until I come back, that would have been, as you guys would say, a strong frame to live in. And I didn't have that strong frame.
If it was happening today and you're having this conversation today, what would you do differently?
I would have said, you're going to need to wait until, I'm back there and we can figure this out together.
Talk to us about figure it out together. What does that actually look like?
If I tell you, hey, I'm thinking about getting a tattoo, here, and this is what it's going to look like, that doesn't really give you a whole lot. Now, if you were come with me in person, let's go, let's go do this. And then you'll see from there, sort of thing. And I was just like, all right, well, how big is it going to be? Where is it going to be at? Those are all deciding factors, and it's hidden, so it's not a big deal. But if it was something like a sleeve tattoo, that would have been a different story. But thankfully it's a hidden tattoo.
So do you, like, in your ideal world, does your wife ever have a tattoo?
No.
Okay, so that's kind of a deciding, that's definitely a deciding factor there. You don't have to.
It's a question that exactly popped in my mind, Levi.
Same.
Yeah, you could kind of, say, hey, it's up to you, sort of thing. But if you're the one leading the relationship, there is a certain decisiveness. It's almost like, what do you call it, Oz? The burden of decision or something like that?
Burden of command.
Can you explain that a little bit? I don't think we've ever talked about it on the podcast here, but I really like what you said last time we hung out.
Burden of command, right? People have this idea in their head that command and control and having authority is this really sexy, awesome thing. In reality, it is a burden. If you've ever been in a leadership position, whether it's in the military or in a civilian context, the higher up you go in leadership and command, actually the worse the job tends to be, and the more pressure there is, more anxiety. And generally speaking, if you screw up, it's all on you, or if somebody under you screws up, it's all on you. And then when you win, it's generally the attributions to people below you. So you get all of the downside and very little of the upside, typically. So there's a great burden to command. So when people are interested, you hear things like, oh, if I were CEO, I would do this. And the thing is, you would never take that job more often than not, because it's a terrible job, even if the pay is so good. And in the military context, it's a terrible burden if you're in command and you're sending people off to their death. You have to reap all of those consequences of those decisions and sit in it and live in it. And if you have to make a decision, there's rarely just like a black and white decision. If you think about, okay, well, if I go left or I go right, it's rarely that clear, right? Most of the time, if you're making a decision in a high level leadership capacity, it's you have a menu of options, some of which are terrible, some of which are somewhat better, and some of them are a complete, shot in the dark, and you're going to have to use your best discernment to figure out what it is, but there's no clear path forward. And no matter what you choose, you're just going to have to live with those decisions and carry on with those consequences. And so as the man in the relationship in a Christian context, and I would argue just the way the world has tended to operate across cultures, the men have that burden of command in their family, and women in the West right now think they want that, but in reality they don't, and they will resent you if they have to assume that mantle, because they'll realize very quickly that they don't want the burden of those consequences, that your shoulders should be carrying that burden. And so being able to be decisive and being very direct with your expectations is actually giving them a blessing. So if for example, I made it really clear with my wife, I don't want her to get a tattoo. I don't have any tattoos. I don't necessarily have anything against them, but frankly, I'm not artistic enough to want to do that permanently to my or someone else's body. And so don't want it. I've made that really clear, and she's found that helpful and clarifying.
My question, I guess, was, given the kind of what Oz just said about the burden of command, in your frame being how you, like your world perspective, how you act on your most ideal day, in your frame, or your ideal frame, how would you want to react or proactively react or whatever to the situation you went through with your wife, or any other instances of, because do you think it's likely that this will come up again?
Let me clarify what Levi's asking. Not will your wife likely get a tattoo behind your back again, but is it likely that you're going to have disagreements where she's going to do things even though she knows that you don't really care for it or approve?
The thing that she has shown me in person so far has told me that she is not the kind of person that does that. And nothing has led me to believe that and the way that I handled that was very poorly. And that reflects, I take full responsibility because I was wishy-washy about it. And she was certain that she wanted it. And from that, she chose to make that choice based on me telling her, do whatever you want, because I was so livid.
Sure. So I guess to press into that a little further, you're saying now you would be more direct. When we asked you the question of if you were to approach the situation differently, what would you do? You would have waited till you had a chance to discuss it with her in person, maybe even go down to the tattoo parlor or figure out how big, what area, whatever. And so it seems though still in that answer, that's not a direct answer. You then have told us that you wouldn't want her to get a tattoo, period. And if you already knew that, why go through the dog and pony show of pretending there's that door open when in your mind it's closed anyways?
I would like to ideally give it a shot. And then if, it comes down to it, like, well, I just really don't like that still. And, if I haven't seen it and I know that I don't want it.
Is there a part of you that feels like if you were just to tell her no, that would come off controlling and that she would reject you over it?
No, I know that she would do it. She would listen. That would
she'd be pissed about it.
Yeah, she'd be pissed about it. And that's the thing that I struggle with. And if I'm nervous, I'm living in her frame. And so, that was me living in her frame.
Yeah. So that's kind of what, listening to your story here, it sounds like there's a degree of not wanting to rock the apple cart, so to speak, and get her fired up about something and deal with the wrath of life or whatever.
Yep.
And that's understandable. I mean, that's the culture we live in. You turn on the TV and geez, every freaking thing that even has a married family attached to it anymore, the wife is the one beating her husband over the head about something. So it's in the culture. That said, I think from a loving standpoint too, being direct and being clear with expectations is actually a more loving way to go anyways, because if you go down to the tattoo parlor and you have them drop the picture and you get that much invested into it and then you pull the plug, you actually just pull the rug out from under her worse and she's going to be more pissed.
Yeah, that is definitely correct.
And so from the very get-go, if you're direct about your expectations, and of course, maybe somewhere down the road, you've taken different information, you change your mind, you decide that you really want nothing more than her to have like a full face tat or something like that. But as a guy, you have the right to reserve the right to change your mind down the road. But I think that just being yes with, let your yes be yes and your no be no is actually a more loving way to go. And it's a much more level way to lead your wife, because she might get upset about your answer in the meantime, but not as upset as she's going to get down the road. And it's actually, much easier for everybody to just be straight up at the beginning.
Well, to put it in secular terms, it's kind of a just a tip situation. It's better to not be in that situation in the first place than it is to get all the way there and then have to withdraw at the last second.
Yes, that's a very good point. And that's sort of the same mentality that you're describing, the incorrect one, that I'm debating whether or not I'm going to ask her to get it removed.
So tell us more about that real fast before we go into any other questions. What is that debate like in your head right now?
For me, it's completely internal. I have not shared this with her because it's not her business what I'm going on. And John and I, we had talked about this earlier about whether or not I am going to, and the answer that I'm going to give her is going to be get it removed or don't. So part of that is, all right, I'm going to look at it in person and see, is this something I really like? Is it not really that big of a deal? And a lot of people that I've talked to have been like, yeah, it's not a big deal. But, for me, it's like, I just don't want that.
So you've yet to see it in person?
I've seen it in person, but I haven't spent a lot of time looking at it because unfortunately our interactions are limited. I'm still away for work. I'm not happy about it. I'm really not.
Honest question here, and I say this because I've been in the situation before and I know how it goes. It's easy when you're at a distance to get it worked up in your head. I'm going to be blunt, direct. This is what's going to happen and that's how it's going to go. And then she gets there standing in front of you. And all of a sudden, all that goes out the window, and you're like, I guess I can live with this. It's not as big of a deal as I thought it was. How will you manage your emotional reaction to that and the desire to cave just because she's there?
That is one thing that I have no issue with when it comes to most things. I feel really comfortable around her, and if anything, she's the one that's really uncomfortable about it right now because I'll ask her, questions about it. And she's just so uncomfortable with it. And she's like, I really regret getting this. And from the limited conversations that we have had about it, it almost seems like she just wants me to tell her, like, get it removed because she knows that I don't find it attractive and she knows that I don't like it. So, yeah.
Let me tell you from experience, and I don't know your wife, so I may be off base here, but I'm going to tell you in the thousands and tens of thousands of posts and comments that I've read and the life experience that I've had, it's like this. Probably what's going on in her head is, I like it, but I know he doesn't like it. So I'm going to tell him I'm uncomfortable with it so that I can soothe his feelings about it right now. And when we get together, I know that I'm going to be able to win him over because he loves me and this shouldn't be a big deal.
My thoughts
And
exactly.
Yeah,
women
if
are
she wasn't into it,
really
she wouldn't have
good
gotten
at
a
it.
permanent ink job there. I mean, I think that's pretty self-evident.
Yeah.
And you've expressed your disappointment in it, and whether verbally or I don't know if you've outright said like, yeah, I don't like it now, but one way or another, she would have picked up that you don't approve of it, and you don't find it attractive, in your own words. And so, yeah, she's not going to try and counter signal you on that one, more than likely. I mean, part of my
she
thought
hasn't
on
moved
this,
to get it removed yet.
yeah, and part of my
He
thought
could have
is,
done that before even getting home.
man, I mean, like, part of this is I think I'm tempted to say just let her leave it there and let it be a reminder every time you see it that you screwed up, and this is what indirect leadership looks like.
Sometimes the best lessons are the most painful ones to learn.
From what she got, it doesn't sound like it's that obtrusive anyways, but I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, like, I think going back on this now, it's like you're talking about doubling down on and the resentment and the drunk leader. I don't know if you've read the post about drunk captains or whatever, but if you're the captain of the ship, this is a situation where you are the drunk captain and she's trying to make the best decisions she can over here, and the crew gets a little rowdy when the captain's not up at the helm and paying attention to what's going on. Here, when you could have said, no, I don't want it, and cut it off there, or go to the parlor and take a look at the designs and then turn it off, and then she's even more ticked because now she's invested in it. Dude, she's so much more invested in it now because it's there.
If you're with her and you're confronting her face to face and she really wants to keep this thing, which she probably does because she went through, she got it, she wants to keep it, she wanted to get it. So if you have that face to face confrontation and she absolutely loses her crap and starts throwing all kinds of verbal and emotional abuse at you, like, I thought you loved me, this shouldn't be a big deal, I thought you cared about me, why are you making such a big deal out about such a little thing? And I mean, come on, it's a big possibility. What would you do in that situation? Are you prepared for that emotional onslaught? Do you think at this point in your journey, you will be able to take control of that and gain the upper hand and put that situation where you want it? Or do you think you'll end up capitulating and backing down and giving her what she wants? Because let me tell you, if you do that, then you've shown her that when she confronts you, you'll back down, which shows her that if she just gets angry, she'll win. So next time you have a confrontation, she knows, well, last time I got angry and I won. And so she'll get angry again. And so the very behavior you hope to change, you're actually reinforcing by taking that confrontation and backing down at the last minute. You're basically setting yourself up for failure and training her to try harder, unfortunately.
To answer your question, am I prepared to deal with that? Absolutely, yes. That being said, even at our worst, which this is definitely would not be our worst if I asked her to, she would not act that irrational. We have been at worst, and even then she wasn't happy about it. It was a misunderstanding, and we were both in the right, but we had thought something else because someone else had led us to believe that there were information. Regardless, it was miscommunication. Neither of us were in the wrong, and we laughed about it later. But even at that point was the worst. She had acted rationally, and she was just upset about it. And I was still that. I didn't tell her this, but that made me really proud of the way that she acted because of how she responded to information that she thought was accurate, that was actually inaccurate about us.
Well, that sounds great. We're known for telling it to you straight, so I'm just going to tell it to you straight. That's a tattoo is not a misunderstanding. A bad haircut is a misunderstanding. A tattoo is a permanent decision. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she's betting that you're going to drop it. So just realize, I don't think at your point in your journey and at this stage of the game, honestly, I wouldn't even try to confront her. I would just drop it, my advice, because you're not going to win. You're going to end up putting yourself in worse position, and you're going to teach her that if she confronts you and gets angry about it, you will back down, which teaches her the very behavior you seek to change, unfortunately. So I think it's a no-win situation for you here at this stage in your journey.
Yeah, I want to kind of blow this up a little bit more macro. We're talking a lot about the tattoo, and I mean, there's obviously that's a point of conflict, and it's kind of one of the literal symbols of the relationship dynamic going on here. Thinking about it, like, she wanted to lose to begin with. Like, yeah, she probably wanted the tattoo genuinely, but she also more so wanted you to pull the leader card and express your opinion straight, and to lead, like, even in conflict. If you were to confront her about it, like, if you're really absolutely dead set on, like, I don't want this tattoo on this girl, like, it needs to go, like, she's going to throw, it's going to be hurricane whatever, but she wants to lose because she wants you to be the man, and she wants, like, that's what turns girls on, that's what gets them wet, like, that's just red pill 101 here. But kind of on a macro level here, you're a young guy as far as I can understand reading through some of your post history here, so you've got a lot of on ramp to figure things out yet, and you're asking a lot of the right questions and you're reading in a lot of the right places. So I'm very bullish on this situation if you do the right things. What I'm thinking about too is, like, what's your plan from here out? Like, I'm with Chuck in the sense of I probably wouldn't touch it. If anything, it'd be more like a Muse Mastery or like something like that, where it's like, oh, you got a tattoo, huh? Let's take a look at that. Yeah, you do look like a naughty girl, and then move on from it, and like make somewhat light of it, or turn it into, a sexual thing or whatever. But the point being is, like, this is only a small, very visible showing of what's going on as the relational dynamic. So what's your plan going forward to gain control over this situation? Because I see this is like the early onset of a new marriage, where there's this kind of like testing, how far is he going to let me go on my own before he expresses his will and he takes on that burden of command.
And I think before you answer too, I know you're in the military right now, and I think the amount of time you have left in your service here, for at least until you re-enlist or make that decision to not re-enlist, does factor in here, since you're not at home right now. So when you answer Oz's question, I would probably touch on that a little bit as well, because the separation and the fact that you're somewhere else right now does factor into this.
Yes, I definitely agree. From what I've heard from you guys before, you guys talk a lot about value, and whether it be conscious or subconscious, who has more value in the relationship. And this is not a put down to her at all. She's young, I'm young, but I'm a little bit farther ahead than she is. And women will be women. She finds me more attractive. I don't know. She thinks that I'm more attractive. I think that she can think whatever she wants, but I don't disregard that compliment at all. I'm not at all negative towards that. I'm very receptive, but I'm not like, oh, look, I'm the best looking guy in the world, because I'm confident. The line between confidence and arrogance is a fine line, and I try to figure out how to walk that. I'm doing a pretty good job, so I'm going to keep on doing that. I know that for a fact I'm not re-enlisting. I actually only have 15 months left in my contract, and I'm not re-enlisting at all. Part of this is because I don't want to be away anymore. And Oz, you said earlier that mentioned something about testing. This was most definitely a test, and I most definitely failed. Going forward, how do I make sure that doesn't happen? That's part of the reason that I reached out to communities that I think could foster into me and help me and figure out, the right way to go.
What type of things are you working on, and what's your direction here?
Becoming the best that I can be. Improving myself is like a non-stop journey. It's not like, oh, now I'm married, now I can just become fat. And Oz, you've even expressed your distaste for a church that you've went to before, and the guy had a total, he was a jock and he had his heyday, and then he got this, hot cheerleader wife or whatever, and then he just let himself go, and now he just kind of rubs it in the congregation's faces because now he has that.
True story.
Right. Yeah. Now the journey has just begun. Now I'm going to get traps like you, because let's be real. And now and not only physically, but I have to developing myself mentally. It's a nonstop improvement. It strive to improve, to be better, to work on myself.
So what specifically are you doing? What things are you doing specifically to achieve those things that you just mentioned?
He wants to know your map.
You ever read The Miracle Morning?
Familiar with it.
I know
Yeah.
the gist of it, but never
Waking
read
up
the
an
whole
hour
book.
earlier.
Yeah, kind of. That was one of the practices that he suggested. Now, waking up early is not an issue for me, obviously, but waking up early, it helps out. I read every single morning for a set amount of time. I go to the gym. I'm not able to go daily as I'm right now. I'm currently a bit busy, but I still am required PT. I'm required to work out. So that I definitely don't skip that. So bettering myself mentally, but not only in the sense of reading books on how I improve myself personally. If I'm a success as a person, everything around me, everything that I touch and do will be a success. So I have to focus on myself becoming a success before things like my marriage can be a success, before things like my business can be a success, before my career can be a success. All of those,
Yes.
I have to make sure that I am a successful person myself before anything else can be successful.
Here's something that I've just picked up in this conversation, and it maybe it should be first conversations. You're a really serious guy, from what I can gather here, and your responses so far have been very, very serious, and that's good to a point. And I'm actually more geared that way normally and naturally, more of get into the guts of it, be serious, whatever. But I have actually found that to work somewhat counter to my goals, especially relationally, because you can get jacked, you can get rich, you can all these other things, but at the end of the day, you still have to be winsome, you still have to have charisma, you still have to be able to draw someone into your frame, and that takes more than big traps. Trust me, I know. You would be disgusted at knowing how little I actually try to work my traps intentionally. It's ridiculous. But what I'm getting at is, so it seems like you're a really serious guy, and I don't doubt that you're going to be successful. You sound like you're on the right track, and just talking to you seem like a smart guy. But what are you doing to enhance some of the game part of this, I guess?
I am a pretty humorous guy. I make her laugh.
Not a very humorous way to put it, just saying.
Yeah, I am funny because I am funny. I make myself laugh, and I'm pretty good at that. But for the most part, I'm serious with myself because I have to be. I take and part of the reason that I am right now like this is because I'm new to this. This is going to be posted online. I have to watch what I say, not only because of the military, but because of our situation, everyone getting banned, new president, stuff like that. There's tons of reasons why right now I have to watch what I say. So that's why I have been. My lighthearted self is when we're offline, not being recorded. Why don't you catch me then?
I will say that's definitely fair given the current situation. It's just something I want to pitch out there because some of our listeners, I think, fall under the same trap. I think that things like Reddit in general filter for people who are a little bit, I don't know, spurgy about things. And I think that you tend to get a lot of really serious people. And I think one of the things people can do to help themselves out the most is to quit being so serious all the time and learn how to find humor in things, especially difficult things. And like, good Lord, you kind of already got around to it a little bit, but our current political situation and the way things are headed, we're going to have to be pretty good at finding some humor in some dark circumstances down the pipe. So I would just encourage anyone listening, check yourself, think about it. What are you doing to see some of the silver lining and to make light of some of the things going on? Because not only is it when someone helps you out in your relationships, but it's good for your soul too.
And I'll say I can echo some of what Mr. Ocean Gross is saying here. I definitely have a serious persona when I engage online in a lot of contexts. And so, but in real life, I know that humor, practical joking, being able to have fun with life is really one of my greatest strengths. And so that's why I wrote my Merry Christmas post that I put on both MRP and RPC. Merry Christmas, I put together my tricks of the trade for a fun frame list as your present. Good ideas for fun during the holidays.
Thank
and
you
it's
for
just
that,
a
by the way.
whole.
I've read that multiple times and I absolutely love it. And I've even tried it before. It works. Although I will tell you this, I did one of them wrong. I did it so wrong. I was trying for something and I got something else. I'll tell you later.
I can see how some of these could go wrong if you don't pull them off properly.
Well, I also didn't do amplify and agree, right? I thought it was for things that I disagreed with that I was supposed to amplify and agree that point, and then that ended up really badly, and I was like,
was it a good learning experience though?
Ocean Gross isn't allowed it back at family Christmas now, is what I'm gathering from this.
That's okay. Families can be sticks in the mud anyway. So look, my personal approach is this. Sometimes things just suck during the day. In fact, there's a lot of days that things suck, especially these days. can you make somebody laugh at least one time per day? Can you crack a joke? Can you say something stupid? Can you give a funny look? Make somebody smile or make somebody laugh at least once or twice a day. That's a good approach, because if you can keep that skill from getting dull in bad situations, when you get in good situations, it'll just kind of come out of you naturally because you'll have the practice.
Right. And it's not even just casually being able to do it, but can you do it in the most contextually appropriate, serious, and intense moments? So, like a good example of this, just 2 days ago, my wife and I were walking into a very serious family meeting that we knew was not going to go well. And my wife was so stressed out about this. She had a panic attack. She starts hyperventilating, like bawling out in tears, really total breakdown. And her sister comes into the car and is trying to hold her. And, I just, say generally, there's nothing to be scared of. And then I pause and I blurt out the line, just trust in Mother Nature, which if anybody's ever been to Great Wolf Lodge, they know this song. There's nothing to be scared of here. Just trust in Mother Nature. And so like the song pops into her head in the midst of her panic attack, and her sister start laughing. And that's what it took to pull her out of the panic attack and get her to be able to walk into the meeting. Right. And so like, it's important to be able to find ways that are contextually appropriate, not like cracking a random weird dirty joke or something in that moment, but something that can tie the situation to raise her mood. That's a hard ability, to be able to use humor in dark situations like that and be able to have it pull her out of her own frame and into your confidence and charisma. But learn to do that, because that can be very effective.
And I had been practicing exactly that. In some of the worst moments. I didn't do it right, but I still tried.
Fail a lot of times before you get it right.
Well, and that's how you
especially
learn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Edison tried over 100 different substances for a filament before he found one that made a light bulb. So yeah, keep trying. As long as you're making the effort, you'll get there.
Bro, I'm Nikola Tesla gang, but hey, you know what? We'll give it to him. I was a little bit drawn to your post and your story because I have a good friend, a friend of my wife. She had basically the same situation happen, but she was the wife who wanted that tattoo. And so we got her side of it. And then he was opposed to it and she did it anyways. This plays out periodically. She was absolutely looking for him to step up and make his opinions known. She was absolutely testing him, and he totally failed, and he failed, and he failed a bunch of different times. And it was looking pretty bad for a while. My wife and I intervening, both with the two of them, have been helpfully red pilling them, I guess, as they've walked that path more and more. And as he's been more assertive, making his opinions known about these things, she has become much more responsive, much more attracted to him, and their dynamic is improving pretty dramatically. There was a time period where I was pretty worried about where they were headed, and really they've turned it around. I hope that's encouragement to you, and I would really strongly say your wife is looking for you to lay down, these are my expectations, I am the man here. And you can do it obviously in a way that's not, you're being a jerk, and that should be evident at this point, but she's looking for it. And if you can supply that to her, she can be an awesome helpmate.
Guy might be your first disciple, making little Osmium Zulu disciples.
not the first, just one of the better.
Right, but I can echo that too. I was just chatting with my sister over this weekend, reminding her, because I was inviting her to our Discord and saying, I've quoted you on there before. And she says, really? What did I say? I was telling a story about how early in my learning and journey, I was asking her just general concepts. Said, do you ever ask your husband to do something for you with the expectation or hope that he says no? She's like, yeah, I do that all the time. But why would you do that? And she says, because it makes me feel really good when he says no and shows me that he's a really strong leader of our household. And this is coming from like a woman who's, from my knowledge, my sister's never heard of the red pill or followed any of that. But just innately, she understands as a woman, this is who I am. This is what I do. It's part of what makes me feel good. Your wife is looking for the same thing. This is not just some crazy theory that men say just to be misogynistic. People do this. It's the way it is. Just bear that in mind. Don't feel like you have to overly justify or beat around the bush with, oh, but she's a girl and so maybe this and that. No. Just accept the realities.
Definitely agree.
I want to commend you on your approach to these things. You've owned up to some mistakes. You've seemed to ask good questions. You are willing to be teachable. Not that we have it all figured out, but I think that anyone who comes to the sub and thinks that we're a bunch of manies needs to take a lesson here. At the end of the day, if you come in and you think you know it all and can't be taught, we're going to kick you out of the sub so quickly or run you out one way because you're just not helpful and you can't be helped. I think that you've made a good example of somebody who is relatively new to these things, who can take their lumps accordingly, move on, and be better for it. So
Completely
I think
agreed.
that's a good lesson out there.
Exactly. We were all where you are once in one way or another. The situation, the specifics may be a little different. Man, when I found all this stuff, dude, I was a freaking mess. It takes time. It really does. You'll get there. Got to take your time, apply the principles one by one. And the main thing, just close your mouth as much as possible. Don't say any more than you have to. You'll pick it up.
Oh, something like STFU is something what I remember reading earlier. So yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, something like that.
I definitely appreciate it. It is beyond helpful, and it's good to know that the advice that it's being given is. I know that it's not just tomfoolery, as it were, because a lot of the pastors, you know, that I would have watched years ago normally, and I look at them and I'm like, I look at them differently now because I think this guy's weak. I mean, not only is he, you know, morally weak, but he's also physically weak. And how can I take advice from him? Because, you know, his life is in not a great situation either. And so the mainstream is really not the way to go. But I definitely have nothing but hope for the future because, you know, it is what you make it. And I definitely plan to make it as good as it can be. That being said, how does one go about finding one of these, you know, people like you in person? I know a few from church, but not nearly enough. And none of them are as red-pilled as I think that they should.
That's pretty, to me, it's pretty easy. When you talk to a guy, you ask him his opinion of Ephesians 5, wives, submit to your husbands, and see what he says.
Okay.
And even then, you're going to find a lot of mixed results. I mean, there are a lot of people who have correct theology and yet still don't live it out properly.
Yeah.
In my experience, your better bet. I think I've ever ran into a person that is like easily distinguishable as red pill or being red pill. And so your best bet is to just slowly either red pill somebody, talk to them about red pill ideas, and just see what their response is, you know, not coming on too strong with red pill, I guess, philosophy, but talking about how relating the Bible to certain concepts, like Chuck was saying, husbands, love your wives. Well, what does that look like? Why did Christ do that? He did it because he wanted to, and then seeing what their response is. But then, like, Oz and I have hung out, and I don't know how we figured it out, but we learned, I actually contacted him. So just kind of like you're doing here, I contacted him and I was like, I'm in Oregon. And he was like, I'm in Oregon. I don't know if that's too much doxing for you. If it is, then delete
I don't
that
live there
out,
anymore, so whatever.
But yeah, and then
Got the hell out of there while I could.
Yeah. The oh man, there's a new bill that just got introduced to the House. That's
But we don't need to go into that.
Yeah. Red pill politics.
I am much more of a Neanderthal about these things. It basically comes down to, does this guy have control of his family and his overall life? And then two, does his wife seem to just get wet for him? I mean, if it's the answer to those things are no, then he's probably not red pilled.
I would also throw out the idea of, one, I always give the plug, join the Discord. The Discord is a great way where you're going to meet other guys who are going to train you on not only these concepts, but also on how to make disciples. And then two, you take what you learn about how to make disciples, you find a guy in your real life, your personal life outside of the online internet scope, and you start discipling him. You raise him up until instead of him being somebody you disciple, he becomes a peer. And now you've got somebody else who you can talk about these things with. You can share and swap ideas, and he learns new things and you learn from him, and you learn new things and he learns from you, and it goes back and forth. It's a beautiful thing. That's how it can and should happen. So if you can't find anybody naturally out in the wild, I always say you'll never find that unicorn in the wild. Go raise them up.
On that note, I got to split, gentlemen. Good talking with you.
All right,
All right.
Thank you.
Adios, guys.